How good is our God? How good is our God, church? Amen. Hey, just a couple of things before I share with you this morning. We've had somebody drop off a whole bunch of bread rolls. So they are out at Guest Central. If you want to take some bread rolls with you as you leave today, that's what we're all about, just giving. So head on out there and grab something for the week. We would love you to do that. The other thing I want to do is also just to acknowledge the Rasmussen and Natalie families. I know a lot of you are here with us today. You've been here for the funeral yesterday of your mum and your grandmother. And we're just glad that you are worshipping with us today, and we want to welcome you with us today. So as most of you know, I grew up in this church. And back when I was growing up, this place was a lot more about behaviour and appearances than it was about being inclusive, raw, real and relatable. There were definitely people here that were keeping their love on, but some of them were doing it in all sorts of inappropriate ways. Sad but true. For those of you who know him, John Den was the lead pastor of Papster for all of my formative years. He baptised me as a young girl, and I was now engaged to Richard. Richard had grown up in Rotorua and Palmerston North, but he'd moved to Auckland and to Papster for me. I know, he moved here for love. It's beautiful. And so it just made sense that John would marry us. And so we were going to see him each week for pre-marriage counselling. Now remember, we are all about appearances. We're about saying the right thing. We're about looking like the golden couple as we walk into week 3 of pre-marriage counselling. And John's talking to us about the 2 things that people fight the most about in marriage. What do you think they are? Am I hearing it? Yeah, you got it. Sex and money. Okay. And he asked us the question, why do you think that sex and money are the 2 things that couples fight about the most? Well, without hesitation, Richard replies, because you can't get enough of either. I know. Oh my goodness. I was dying. I was laughing, I was blushing, but I was dying the most. If only we knew then what we know now. This series is based on the book written by Danny Silk called Keep Your Love On. It came highly recommended by one of our elders, Karyn, who was also part of our sermon planning team. And I'd heard great things about Danny and his work around relationships, but I hadn't heard him speak and I hadn't had a chance to read his book until planning for this series. His book is awesome, and it's available online. It's at Manor, so if you learn things during this series that you wish you had discovered years ago, just like we did, or if you are a young person and you can learn these things before making a zillion mistakes like us old people have done, then I would encourage you to buy it. Look him up online, because if we actually apply this material to our lives, instead of just thinking, yes, I'm sure that's right, I think so-and-so should apply it to their lives. If we apply it to ours, then I know that it will bring a whole lot of joy instead of a whole lot of heartache to our lives. And if my marriage analogy at the start has thrown you off, this series is not just for couples. This series is about relationships, and we all have relationships. The principles that we're going to learn, we can apply as parents, as friends, as spouses, and as colleagues. So don't be thinking that this is for somebody else today. This is for you, okay? So let's get started. Today we're going to begin the journey by taking a look at love versus fear. We're going to look at choices, and we're going to think about connection versus disconnection. To start, I think it's really important that we understand the very foundation of love. And just so you know, this is huge. It's really complex, and so I'm not standing here thinking that I have all the answers, but this is what I understand to be true. Before we can even consider love, we have to think about what life looked like without it, what life looked like without God. And the simple word for that is chaos. The world was dark and void and chaotic before God stepped into it. So we need to know that God understands chaos. God isn't fazed or put off or worried about chaos. God just sees chaos as a great place to begin his work. So if you are sitting here today and you know or experience chaos, and I know that there are some of you here today that do, then I want you to know that God understands your chaos. He's not concerned by it. He's not concerned by your junk or your mess. He's actually keen to just jump right into it with you. Because what I know about God is that his passion, mission, and purpose is to transform chaos into beauty. So if you feel like you're currently surrounded by chaos, sit back and relax today, because God is just getting started with you. You see, right from the beginning, God created us for connection. He made a perfect garden, and then he created perfect human beings and put them in charge of all that he'd created. All he wanted in return was connection. All he wanted was a relationship with them. Unfortunately, they, like we so often are, were deceived by a serpent, by Satan, and they chose what they wanted. They chose self, and that resulted in a disconnection from God, and it created all sorts of chaos and all sorts of consequences for them and for us. But God always chooses connection, and so he chose to go to the cross, and he took our chaos with him. This is the tricky thing to understand, but we actually died with him on that cross. He absorbed our mess to not only repair, but to dissolve that disconnection. So now we have complete access, total connection with God. And better than that, 3 days later, he rose from the dead so that he could live in us to slowly transform our chaos into beauty. That's what God is about, turning chaos into beauty. Now, this is important. If Jesus took all of our consequences, if Jesus took all of our mess and our chaos, then who am I to judge your sin and chaos? And who are you to judge mine? Sometimes I think that we as Christians feel like we're on earth to make sure that sin is punished. And if that's not the case, then we get confused as to the purpose of the church. Isn't it to judge and sentence sinners? In fact, it's the exact opposite. The gathering is a place in this chaotic world where we can practice learning how to keep our love on. That's why we gather. That's why this matters. Religion is just another set of rules. So why would we, if we have been set free from sin, choose to be imprisoned by religiosity? If we understand the consequence for sin has been fully taken, then what will our response be? Because God not only wants to fulfill our God-given dreams and plans, but he wants to give us himself. I think often we think as human parents that we want better for our kids than God wants for us. But God created us to be the objects of his love. God chose us. John 15:16 says it straight. It says, "You didn't choose me, I chose you. And I appointed you to produce lasting fruit. In doing so, God will give us whatever we ask for." And then he says, love each other. God chose us. He's transforming our chaos into beauty so that we can learn to love others in the same way that God sees and loves us. That we would still see the mess and the chaos in somebody else's life, but we would continue to love them in and through it. Love is a choice. And like the video said, love is a verb. It's a doing word. It's not a feeling. It's not an emotion. And it's definitely not like the movies portray. Love is a choice. I want to talk to our young people for a minute. Guys, a study was done several years ago. And it was done for a number of elderly couples who had been happily married their whole lives. It's rare to find that these days. And they asked them several questions, trying to work out what it was that ensured a lasting marriage. And there was one common thread in their answers. They said that they went into marriage deciding that divorce was not an option. Now, I want you to hear me on this. Divorce is an option if you are not safe, either physically or emotionally. Hear me on that. But in most cases, okay, this is really good thinking, because the study went on to share that when your brain decides that divorce is not an option, then it scrambles to find a solution. I think all too often we go into relationships thinking that if it doesn't work out how I want, that if it doesn't make me feel good, then I can just leave. Instead, what if we walked into relationships choosing love, even on the days that I don't like the other person? Sometimes we have to choose to be vulnerable, and sometimes we just have to choose to have some stinking hard conversations before it all gets out of control. But if you are here today and you are thinking, I wish I knew this stuff. I wish that I had made some different choices. You are not alone. And I want you to know that there is no judgment in this place, because we all know how tricky relationships are to navigate. But we want you to know today that it doesn't matter what has happened in your past. This series is about drawing a line in the sand and learning new ways to move forward from today, yeah? So it doesn't matter what's happened before. It's all good with God. It's all good with us. But today, and in this series, let's just draw a line in the sand and learn new ways to move forward. Silk says that a healthy, lasting relationship can only be built between two people who choose one another and take full responsibility for that choice. Traditional marriage vows express this really well. People at the altar don't say, you will. You will love me. You will cherish me in sickness and in health. And they don't say, I will love you as long as you love me back. Vows are about what I am going to do. I will protect you. I will love you. I will serve you. I will be faithful. I take responsibility for my choice. Love is a choice. As we know, there are always two parties in a relationship, and both are responsible for their side of the relationship. But they are founded on one of two goals: connection or disconnection. And from this point on, I'm going to be talking a lot about fear. And when I say the word fear in this context, I'm referring to Martin Luther's understanding of sin and fear, which is disbelief. For example, when Jesus said to the woman who was being stoned for adultery, "Go and sin no more," he wasn't expecting that she would actually go and never stuff up again. What he was saying was, don't stop believing that I can turn your chaotic life into something beautiful. We have to keep believing in God and His power and what He can do in our lives. Disconnection is founded on fear. It's founded on unbelief. Disconnection means that I protect myself at all costs. I'm focused on keeping the rules, or punishment is the result. Disconnection results in conditions. Connection, on the other hand, is founded on love. Connection means that I choose to love. I choose to be responsible for myself, and I am secure in the fact that God loves me first and foremost. Connection results in freedom. And it's really important to realize that we are always sending and receiving messages in relationships. We are always moving towards or away from one another. We are always building connection, or we are causing disconnection. And the choice to pursue connection brings us right up against the real conflict that lies at the core of every relationship. It's a spiritual battle. It's a heart battle, a battle drawn between the two most powerful forces that drive us, fear and love. If we want to be a person that is capable of building intimate relationships, then it is absolutely vital that we learn how these forces operate and align ourselves with love. Now, when it comes to our relationship with God, we never have to worry. We never have to be anxious about God's side, because there is nothing that we can do to make him love us more. There is nothing that we can do to make him love us less. So we don't need to worry about God's side of the equation. But for my side of the relationship with God and with everybody else, we get to choose whether love or fear will rule us. 1 John 4, verse 18 says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. Because fear has to do with punishment, and the one who fears is not made perfect in love." Every reaction we have is defined by one of two responses, love or fear. And the number one tactic of the devil is to disengage me from my life source, to disengage me from love, from God. And from the beginning, he has done that by lying to us. If we believe the lie, then he wins. The battle between love and fear is a battle between God and Satan, and who I listen to the most. We discovered in our Fear Not series back in August that the phrase most communicated in the Bible is fear not. When God says do not fear, he's not trying to shame us. He's just reminding us that grace is all around us. He's already given us what we need to be victorious over fear. It's not a command, it's a partnership. He empowers us to do what we previously didn't think we could do. Grace enables and empowers us. Fear not is actually a promise that we have the grace to deal with what we're facing, because there's a difference between feeling fear and partnering with it. Because I'm someone who feels fear a whole lot of the time, I have quotes directly in front of me in my office that speak truth and life into and over me when the devil is throwing lies at me. And one of them says this: "The will of God will not take us where the grace of God cannot sustain us." We may feel fear. The devil will lie to us, and he will do it over and over and over again. And because of that, we will feel it, but we don't have to partner with it. We don't need to be controlled by it. I want you to ask yourself the question, how would I treat a friend who lied to me as much as my fears do? If if God leads us into battle, it's only because he knows that we are thoroughly equipped for that battle. So if you are sitting here today and you are feeling the devil's attacks, it's because he is threatened by you. If you were doing nothing, he'd leave you alone. Isaiah 51 from verse 12 reads this: I am the one who comforts you. So why are you afraid of humans who wither like grass and disappear? Have you forgotten the Lord your Creator? Have you forgotten the one who has stretched out the sky like a canopy? Have you forgotten the one who laid the foundations of the earth? Will you remain in dread of human oppressors? Will you continue to fear the anger of your enemies? Because soon all your captives will be released. Imprisonment, starvation, and death will not be your fate. Because I am the Lord your God. I stir up the sea, and I have put words in your mouth and hidden you in my hand. Wake up. Sorry about that. It was to make you wake up. I'm the one who comforts you. Have you noticed who I am? Did you really think that it was about you? When we choose to partner with fear, we choose the inferior. We choose the liar instead of the one who created all things, instead of the one who loves us without condition, the one who has and continues to go into battle for us. Will we choose to feed ourselves on what kills or on what gives life? Understand me when I say that because fear and love represent God and Satan, we will never eliminate fear from our lives, not completely until Jesus returns and removes chaos forever. Until then, fear versus love is a tension that we will wrestle with. But the more that we rely on God, the more that we focus on him and connect with him, the more he'll help us overcome the chaos and the disconnection and the fear and the mess in our lives. Back in 1 John chapter 4, it says, as we live in God, our love grows more perfect. So we won't be afraid on the day of judgment, but we'll be able to face him with confidence because we live like Jesus in this world. Such love has no fear because perfect love expels all fear. We love each other because he loved us first. If someone says, I love God, but hates a fellow believer, that person is a liar. For if we don't love people we can see, how can we love God who we cannot see? He's given us this command: those who love God must also love their fellow believers. How we treat the natural illustrates and exemplifies what we claim happens in our personal lives. If I say I love God but I don't love people, all people, including the ones that annoy the heck out of me, then it calls me a liar. That's what it says. Perfect love casts out fear. I've always thought that has meant that when I stay connected to God, he eliminates, he casts out, he helps me deal with the fear in my life. And that's partly true. But what I've come to learn is that the word perfect in this passage means love that is made complete over time. And when he carries on speaking in this passage, he talks about what loving completely looks like, how I develop it, how I practice it. And I do that by giving away what I have received. It is only in that kind of love that it casts out fear. It's not just my personal experience. It's the experience that I've had with God that is being translated into how I treat people. Here's the bottom line. We get to choose love or fear as our response every moment of every day. So what are we choosing? God compels, God asks that we choose connection, that we choose love every time, regardless of how somebody else is acting or responding. We need to stop waiting for someone to come to me or another sermon to inspire me. We need to stop waiting for another life group to convict me before we choose to love. There has to be a point at which we take full responsibility for what we are doing, what we are thinking, and what we are praying. What are we doing? Am I living out my relationship with God by loving others? And what am I thinking? Am I focusing on fear? Am I focused on the problem, on the lie? Or am I thinking about what God says to me? And what am I praying? God says, "Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest." It's an exchange. Prayer is about giving God our junk, and he gives us his good. It's an exchange. What are we doing? What are we thinking? And what are we praying? And how do those things play out in our relationships? From the time we enter the earth, pain teaches us to react. And the first reaction that we have to pain is to cry. And when we do, hopefully, someone bigger responds to our cries and makes us feel better. And so we learn that crying is a helpful reaction to pain. But as we grow, our reactions teach us how to avoid pain. For example, if we touch something hot, we learn real fast not to do that again. And the three classic reactions to the threat of pain, as Carl taught us earlier this year, is fight, flight, or freeze. But they all have the same goal, and that's distance. A basic human instinct is that when the threat of harm is high, the level of love is low. And the tricky thing with us humans is that we offer both comfort and protection from pain, but we also offer the threat of pain. When I was thinking about this, I thought about when I was growing up. And when I was a little girl, I used to get a lot of earache. I remember waking in the middle of the night crying from the pain. And my mum, she would dissolve disprin, in a glass of water for me to drink, which I've got to tell you was nearly as painful as the pain. Nasty stuff. But the memory I have is her sitting with me until the pain subsided. Ultimate comfort, ultimate protection. She was also the mum who would slap my legs when I disobeyed. Now, two things you need to know. One, this was many moons ago, so it wasn't illegal back then. Secondly, I only have one such memory of it because I was a very good girl. So we need to decide, how will we respond to people when they offer both comfort and pain? Unfortunately, fear-based reactions to pain are instinctive. That just means that we use them without thinking. And because they come so naturally, we think that they're normal. And we fall back and we use the classic fear-driven reactions when we experience pain in relationships. And we do that by running. We just take off, or we try to control people so that they can't hurt us. But that only leads to more disconnection. And it causes things like unforgiveness and resentment and offense and controlling and manipulation. When we operate out of fear, we may be too afraid to tell people how we really feel, or to explain why we act the way we do. Maybe it's because of something in our past. Maybe it's a secret that I'm keeping. And the really hard thing to realize is that vulnerability creates connection. But at its very core, vulnerability is scary. Because effectively what vulnerability means is that we are putting our fear into somebody else's hands, and we can't then control how they will treat it. But if we want to preserve relationships, then we need to learn how to respond in love instead of partnering with fear. The good news is that God's love is fearless. His gospel says, I love you no matter what. I am not afraid of your mistakes. I'm not afraid of your chaos. And you don't have to be afraid of them or other people's mistakes either. You may, in fact you will, confront painful things in life, but pain and the fear of pain no longer have power to control you. We are free to choose, but as long as we operate out of fear, we will inevitably continue to create distance and disconnection in our relationships with others. And like I said earlier, the awesome thing about God is that we never have to worry about his side of the relationship. He always chooses to love us. He closed any relational gap that we had with him 2,000 years ago. And his ongoing goal continues to be connection, continues to be waking us up to that reality. And nothing, not pain, not even death, prevent him from being that, from bringing that, from loving us and from responding to us with love. So now that we know that we are fully loved by God, we have a choice: fear or love, connection or disconnection. And over the next few weeks, we're going to explore more about what it means to keep our love on in practical ways. Today, however, we've started with the first steps, the foundation and learning how to keep our love on, the choice that only we can make. Will we trust God with our mess? Will we think less of myself and more of him? Will we believe that beauty is beginning to leak into our chaos? Will I choose to keep my love on? Let's pray. Oh, how you love us, and oh, how grateful we are that you do. God, we just are in awe of you. And we just want to thank you that you are the God of connection, that you are more powerful than any fear that we face, than any disconnection that we face. And so, God, we just pray that you would pour yourself into us, that you would start to transform our chaos into beauty. And we just offer that to you today. We say, God, we just want our relationships to be transformed by you. And so, God, you do that best, and we just offer ourselves to you to just learn how to do that better, learn how to keep our love on. We love you. Amen.